what are some things that you think a mortgage agent should be implementing moving forward based on what you're seeing in the market right now? I think a lot of people are thinking about the future when it comes to AI. They want to make sure that they're sitting on technology stacks, at least your technology forward agents and brokers, to take advantage of these things. Because if you're not built from the ground up to implement any of these things into your process, they are borderline useless. You can go to the web version of ChatGPT all you want and say, how would you respond to this email and whatnot? But if instead you got the email from the client, it was logged into your CRM, and then it just auto-populated a suggested email response to the client.
And you can click yes.
That you're like, click yes if you want to hit send. You're like, huge time saver, right? But like, what should folks be thinking about as they build a foundation of their business?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think any system, when I go into the CRM and someone, signs up for the first time, what are the components of a CRM? What are the two most essential things? It's, the features, so what it can do, but then it's also the data. So what's it going to do it on, right? What's the basis? And okay, yes, it can do, respond to a nice email, but, the client needs to be in there in the first place in order to even enable that. What does that kind of lead me to? It's to say, okay, well, for anyone who's forward looking, and I just talked about big data, maybe on the underwriting side, but I think it applies anywhere. I think these AI systems, they live off data, right? It's like oxygen to them. And anyone who's, gone to ChatGPT and gotten, a bad response or a hallucination, as they call it, it's usually a result of maybe some bad data. So I think that anybody looking forward needs to kind of realize, I think, that data is going to be more and more important. Data is really going to be king in this world of AI. And so, first of all, get your data super clean. I know so many brokers who just kind of have maybe a spreadsheet with, half updated. Yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. I don't think that's going to be as optional anymore. So having it super clean, super up to date, so that, hey, when, this revolutionary AI comes along, you can just apply it, versus spending months and months trying to clean up your data while the forward-looking brokers are already, off to the moon with these new types of tools. So getting clean data. And then also the other side of it is also the ownership side of things, right? In the broker space, it's always, who owns the client? It's always confusing. The broker thinks they own it. The lender thinks they own it. The brokerage thinks they own the client because they're ultimately responsible from a compliance angle. And I think everyone does in some sense, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of the client's decision. No one owns that person. That doesn't really make too much sense. It's a relationship that you want to have. At least own the data, have control over the data that you need to enable those relationships. So, that's the first part, the data side of things. And then on the feature side of things, I would say look for open systems. Right? Because again, I don't know what's coming. Who knows what's coming? Could be a crazy new tool that we could never even conceptualize. So I'm not going to say, yes, use Blue, because for sure we're going to be ready for that. I hope we are, and we're planning to be, but I can't put my rubber stamp on it because I don't know what's coming. But I can say with Blue, and I'd say for any other system that you're looking at, make sure they have open APIs, methods in which to interact with these external tools, because we don't know what's coming. And you want to at least be nimble, right? Agile, so that, hey, when they do come, hey, I can quickly build an integration and it's in my system and I'm ready to go. If you have a closed system, then, hey, the only way to use kind of these new, AI tools is to switch systems. And again, you're spending all this time switching systems when the person who used an open system is already using these great innovations. So to summarize, clean data that you own and systems that have, open APIs, open frameworks that you can integrate with.
Yeah, that's really well said. I even think about our own technology stack that we built over time. It's probably important to note we're on Salesforce as a CRM today.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that we made that decision, it was just the flexibility and the ability for it to be an open system and for us to basically plug in anything that we want into that CRM to make it work for us. And so many people build for Salesforce or build with Salesforce in mind, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm building an independent platform, and my next logical step as a technologist or developer, et cetera, is to then make sure that it can be used in Salesforce. The next thing that people typically do when they're building is they build the Salesforce plugin immediately after.
Yes.
And what we have found is that allows us to be quite nimble, because, trying to build a hard-coded platform it's very, very difficult to see that far out into the future to know everything that's going to be needed. And companies are just moving at such a fast rate in terms of their development, especially you mentioned data, like data infrastructure. Like I think we're on our third, data product now, because it was like, 5 years ago, it was like you need this. And then it's like, oh, you need this. And now it's like that. And then, AWS has like a new tool seemingly every like quarter that they roll out. They're like, oh, you don't need any of these three things anymore. We just boxed it right here and it's out of the box. And it's just like a simple little SaaS product. And we charge you based on your data usage. And it just keeps moving along. And we're like, oh man, if we had spent all this time and energy building our own database as opposed to something that is more similar to like an operational data store, that's just like, hey, like we just need a single place that just like holds the data, and then we can move that data around and we can make that data populate anywhere we want based on the way that these other systems are flowing. So in some ways, like the technology story of our business, we accidentally made ourselves dynamic because we were trying to get to market fast. But in reflection, it probably was the right decision, because I would look at other people's systems at times and I would get jealous. I'm like, oh, we should have just built that.
So shiny and new. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so shiny and new. They've got all their branding all over it. But then you fast forward 2-3 years, the management of the code base becomes a heavy cost on the business. And you're like, oh man, like all this new technology is coming out. We can't use any of it because we're on this. And that's a lot of times what's happened with the banks, for example. Like people are like, why can't the banks just move faster and just implement all this new technology stack? Is hard coded, 25 years old. You can't just rip and replace. Everything's connected in and around those systems.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we've done migrations of, an organization of 10 people, and it takes months to move them from system A to system B. You imagine a bank to do that. It's crazy. But I mean, to your point, I mean, absolutely. I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but BluMortgage is actually built on Zoho. I don't know if you're familiar with that platform, but okay. So it's a competitor to Salesforce, but it's very much so something that we thought about too, to say, hey, stay up to date, to have the DevOps, to constantly be building to, new user expectations and new technologies. It's huge. And they invest billions and billions of dollars. I just talked to a broker just last week, but it's a conversation I've had many times where they say, I don't use any of these, CRMs that are made specifically for the mortgage industry, because I did that before. And then 10 years later, I have this thing that looks completely out of date that I can't use, and it's not very useful. So I want to use, something like a Salesforce or something like a Zoho, because literally every year they're spending billions and billions of dollars keeping up with it. And to your point, they have the, developer community